My husband laughed and said, "What are you going to do? Divorce me?" I caught him with my own sister. I didn't say a word. I simply walked into the bedroom and started packing a suitcase. They stopped laughing when they saw what I was putting inside. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I start my story, I would love to know what city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share it in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The day had been achingly, absolutely normal. I remember leaving the office around 5, feeling that familiar sense of satisfaction that comes with a productive week. I'm a partner at an architecture firm in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, that I helped build from the ground up. And while the hours can be long, I love my job. There's a solidity to it, a permanence in creating spaces where people will live their lives. It's a sense of control, I suppose, a feeling that I, too, was the architect of my own life. On the way home, I stopped at an upscale market for fresh pasta and a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. Darnell loved it when I made my homemade bolognese. It was a small thing, but after 25 years of marriage, you learn that love often resides in the little things. It resides in knowing his favorite wine, in making his preferred meal on a random Thursday for no apparent reason. Our house was my sanctuary, a beautiful 2-story estate that I designed myself years ago, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined suburb outside Atlanta. Every detail, from the reclaimed oak floors to the Carrara marble in the kitchen, was something I had meticulously chosen. It was more than a house. It was a testament to the life I thought I had built. A life of permanent solidity. When I got home, Darnell was already in the living room, supposedly reading the newspaper, but I could see his phone propped up behind it. "Hey, babe," I said, dropping my keys and grocery bags on the console table in the foyer. "Smells like you took a shower." "Long day," he said, folding the paper with a crackle. "Wanted to wash it off." He walked over and gave me a perfunctory peck on the cheek. It was routine, rehearsed, the kind of kiss that means nothing more than habit. We made dinner together, or rather I cooked while he leaned against the counter and told me about his day. His boss was an idiot. Quarterly reports were a nightmare. The usual complaints. I listened, offered sounds of understanding, and chopped onions. It was the familiar dance of our evenings, a choreography we had perfected over 2.5 decades. After dinner, we settled onto the living room sofa. It was a custom-made plush sectional in a soft gray fabric that had taken me 6 months to choose. I remember thinking about that, the absurd amount of time I'd invested in paint and fabric swatches, all to create this perfect, peaceful home. The gas fireplace was on just for ambiance, its soft orange light flickering over the framed photos on the mantelpiece. Photos of our wedding, him looking so handsome and nervous in his tuxedo. Photos from family vacations in Maui, our faces wind-burned and smiling. Pictures from my younger sister, Kinsley's, college graduation, Darnell and I on either side of her, beaming with pride. A whole life captured in polished silver frames. I was 52. An age when you believe the foundations of your life are set in stone. You've weathered the storms. You've raised your hypothetical children. You've settled into the comfortable, predictable rhythm of a long marriage. You think you know the person sitting next to you better than the back of your own hand. I picked up a design magazine and Darnell was on his phone. He was supposed to be looking up reviews for a new French restaurant to celebrate our anniversary. 25 years, a quarter of a century. It felt monumental, a milestone that deserved champagne and celebration. But he wasn't looking at restaurants. His phone vibrated, a low, discreet hum from inside his pocket. He pulled it out, and his movements were a little too fast. A little too cautious. He angled the screen away from me, a subtle shift of his body that screamed secrecy. It was a small thing, a tiny hairline fracture on the placid surface of our evening, but my architect's eye for detail, for things that are misaligned, caught it immediately. Then he smiled. It wasn't his usual smile. It wasn't the tired, end-of-day smile he gave me, or the polite, thin-lipped smile for the neighbors. This was a secret smile, a private, lit-from-within grin that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. My breath hitched. It was the one he used to give me when we were first dating, when a simple text from me could make him light up from across a crowded room. To see that smile now directed at a cold, bright screen was like a physical blow, a gut punch that left me winded. Another buzz, more smiling. He started tapping with both thumbs, forehead furrowed in concentration, completely and utterly engrossed. The world outside that small rectangle of light, the crackling fire, the soft background music, his 25-year wife sitting 3 feet away, ceased to exist for him. "Find anything good?" I asked. My voice sounded strained and artificially cheerful even to my own ears. He jumped, startled, as if he'd forgotten I was in the room. He quickly locked the phone and placed it face down on the cushion between us. "Oh no, just an old college buddy, Malik. He sent a funny meme about his kid." Something felt deeply wrong. A cold knot started forming in my stomach. Darnell's college friends were my friends too. Malik always sent funny stuff to our old group chat, not Darnell personally in the middle of the night. But I let it go. You don't detonate a 25-year marriage over a text message. You tell yourself you're being paranoid, that it's your own insecurity talking. You tell yourself to trust him. So I tried. I picked up my magazine, but the sleek blueprints and glossy photos just swam on the page. I couldn't focus. All I could see was that smile, that specific, intimate smile that no longer belonged to me. I watched him from the corner of my eye. This man I had shared a bed with for over 9,000 nights, and for the first time in our life together, he felt like a complete and utter stranger. The silence in the room grew heavy, pregnant with all the things that weren't being said. The peaceful home I had designed to be my sanctuary suddenly felt like a theater set, flimsy and false, and I had the terrifying feeling that the curtain was about to drop. The knot in my stomach didn't go away. It stayed there overnight, a cold, hard lump of dread that made sleep impossible. I lay in our bed, listening to the sound of Darnell's steady breathing next to me, and I felt a chasm opening between us. Every time he shifted in his sleep, I flinched. I replayed the couch scene over and over in my head, dissecting every detail, every nuance, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it, that I'd overreacted. But the image of that smile was burned into my mind. The next day, Friday, I tried to immerse myself in work. I went to the office, sat in meetings about load-bearing walls and zoning regulations. I went through the motions of my normal, structured life, but it was like watching a movie of someone else's day. The little voice in my head kept whispering, kept replaying that secret smile. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I was a grown woman, a partner in a successful firm, not some hysterical, insecure teenager. But the feeling wouldn't leave. That night, the fragile peace I'd tried to rebuild was shattered forever. The evening began with a tense, almost suffocating normalcy. I suggested we order takeout, lacking the energy to cook. Darnell agreed immediately, perhaps too quickly. He seemed anxious to keep things simple, to avoid any real conversation. We ate in front of the TV, watching a mindless comedy, the sound of canned laughter filling the space where our own conversation should have been. After dinner, I was in the kitchen rinsing the dishes. Darnell was leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone again. The same posture, the same intense concentration. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it meant nothing. His phone chimed, a loud, clear notification sound. He had left the volume on this time. He set it face down on the granite counter, the screen dark, and said, "I'm going to grab that bottle of Cabernet from the pantry, the good one." He walked out of the kitchen, and in that moment, the universe or fate, or whatever you want to call it, gave me a choice. I could respect his privacy. I could go back to my bubbling sink of soapy water, dry the dishes, and live with the persistent, corrosive uncertainty for the rest of my life. Or I could know. I stood there for 10 long seconds, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear him rummaging in the pantry, humming a little tune. The sound was so normal, so domestic, it made the situation feel even more surreal. "Just flip it over, Simone," the voice in my head urged. "You have to know." My hand shook as I reached for the phone. It felt heavy in my grasp, as if it held the weight of my entire future. The glass was cold and smooth against my skin. I took a sharp, shallow breath and flipped it over. The screen lit up, and there it was. A text message notification preview, crystal clear. My brain registered the words before I could process the horror. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You were incredible." For a split second, my mind stumbled, trying to make sense of it. An affair. He was having an affair. The pain was sharp, immediate, a red-hot poker to the chest, but it was the name beneath the message that made the world stop spinning. The name that turned sharp pain into a soul-crushing implosion that vaporized everything I thought I knew. It wasn't a name I didn't know. It wasn't a stranger, a coworker, some random woman I could hate from a distance. The name was Kinsley, my sister. My little sister, the child whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the awkward teenager I had coached through her first date, the maid of honor at my wedding, who had given a tearful speech about how I was her hero, the woman whose picture was on my mantelpiece, smiling her bright, beautiful smile right next to mine. I couldn't breathe. The air was sucked from my lungs as if by a vacuum. The sound of the running water in the sink faded into a dull, distant roar in my ears. I stared at the name, my sister's name, on my husband's phone next to those words, and my reality fractured into a million jagged pieces. It wasn't just a crack in the mirror anymore. The mirror was shattered, and the reflection staring back was a woman I no longer recognized, living a life that was a complete and absolute lie. I heard the pantry door open. I heard Darnell walk back toward me, the wine bottle clinking against the corkscrew in his hand. He was still humming that little tune, completely and utterly oblivious. And I just stood there, frozen, holding the evidence of his unimaginable betrayal in my hand, the heat of the phone burning like a brand against my palm. Time seemed to slow to a thick, syrupy crawl. I could feel the cold of the granite countertop seeping into my fingertips where I gripped the edge for support, the only thing holding me upright. Darnell stopped humming when he saw my face. The casual smile dropped from his lips. "Simone, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to speak, but no sound came out. My throat had closed up. I just turned the phone, my hand shaking so violently that the screen seemed to vibrate, and showed it to him. His eyes scanned the display. I watched his face desperately, looking for any sign of remorse, of panic, of shame. There was nothing. I saw a flash of annoyance quickly masked. He looked like a teenager caught breaking curfew, not a man who had just dynamited his 25-year marriage. He let out a long, theatrical sigh. "Look, it's not what you think." The sheer, insulting lameness of that cliché, the most pathetic line in the cheater's handbook, finally broke my paralysis. "It's not what I think." My voice was a choked, raspy whisper I barely recognized as my own. "It says Kinsley. My Kinsley. And it says, you were incredible last night." Each word was a shard of glass I had to force out of my throat. He had the audacity to look bored, put upon. He gently took the phone out of my trembling hand and slipped it into his pocket, as if hiding the evidence would make it disappear. "You're overreacting. You're being dramatic." "Dramatic?" I whispered. Just then, the back door clicked open, and Kinsley walked in. She was carrying a bag from a local pastry shop, a bright, cheerful smile on her face. "Hey, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd grab dessert. They have that lemon tart you love, Simo." She used my childhood nickname, and the sound of it on her lips was a desecration now. Her smile faltered as she took in the scene. She glanced from my ashen face to Darnell's tense posture. A quick, calculating look passed between the two of them. And in that single, fleeting glance, I saw it all. There was no surprise, no confusion, only recognition. She knew. Of course she knew. She wasn't an innocent party caught in the crossfire. She was the other combatant. I looked at my little sister, the woman whose secrets I had guarded, whose tears I had dried, whose life I had celebrated as if it were my own. "Kinsley," I whispered the name, tasting like ash and venom in my mouth. She didn't even try to deny it. She leaned against the doorframe, setting the bag with the tart down on the floor. A slow, satisfied smirk played on her lips. She looked at Darnell, and he looked back at her, and a silent, triumphant conversation passed between them. And then it happened. The thing that broke me, the thing that killed the last shred of hope in my heart. Darnell started to laugh. It wasn't a small, nervous chuckle. It was a full, deep-bellied roar. A laugh of pure, unadulterated mockery, of relief, because the secret was finally out. Kinsley joined in, a high, tinkling laugh that sounded like breaking glass. They stood there in my kitchen, my husband and my sister, laughing at my pain, laughing at the total destruction of my world. The sound echoed off my pristine marble countertops, a grotesque symphony of their shared betrayal. The blood drained from my face. I felt a strange, horrible sense of detachment, as if I were floating near the ceiling, watching this obscene little play unfold below. The woman standing there, with her face like a mask of silent horror, couldn't possibly be me. Between gasps of laughter, Darnell finally managed to speak, wiping a tear of exhilaration from the corner of his eye. The words he said will be etched into my memory, branded onto my soul until the day I die. "Oh, come on, Simone," he wheezed, still chuckling. "It's not that big a deal. What are you going to do? Divorce me?" And in that moment, with his cruel laughter ringing in my ears, something inside me didn't just snap. It died. The loving wife, the trusting sister, the woman who built her life around these two people, ceased to exist, turning to dust and blowing away. And in her place, something cold, hard, and silent began to form, like a diamond under unimaginable pressure. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't hurl the heavy cast-iron skillet at his head, though the image flashed through my mind with vivid clarity. I simply stood there, an empty shell. The laughter finally died out, settling into an uncomfortable silence as they realized I wasn't reacting. They looked at me, a little confused now, their shared amusement giving way to a flicker of awkward uncertainty. "Simone, say something," Darnell said, his tone still light, but with an underlying edge of command. He was used to me reacting, to us talking things out. My silence was a variable he hadn't planned for. I didn't. I turned my back on them, a simple, deliberate movement. I walked out of the kitchen. I crossed the dining room with the long mahogany table where we had hosted so many family Christmases and began to climb the grand, curving staircase. Each step on the plush carpet felt heavy, monumental. I could hear them following me, their hesitant footsteps on the hardwood floor below. "Where are you going? We're talking about this!" Darnell yelled, a note of panic creeping into his voice. But we weren't talking. They were laughing. I was done talking, forever. I walked into our bedroom, the place that had been my sanctuary, the king bed with the ridiculously high thread count sheets I had insisted on, the matching walnut nightstands, the life we had built, contained in those four walls. I went straight to the walk-in closet, a space I had designed to be organized and serene. On the top shelf, covered with a canvas dust bag, was a set of hand-stitched Italian leather suitcases. I had bought them for Darnell for our 20th anniversary, for that trip to Italy we took. He had loved them, showing them off to anyone who would listen. I pulled down the largest suitcase. It was heavy, beautifully made, a symbol of our shared history, our travels, our life together. I laid it on the pristine white duvet of our bed and pulled it open with a firm, decisive tug. They were standing in the doorway now, watching me, their expressions a strange mix of apprehension and lingering arrogance. "What are you doing?" Kinsley asked, her voice tinged with mocking curiosity. "Packing him up, kicking him out? A little dramatic, don't you think?" I ignored her. I walked to my side of the closet. My clothes hung in neat rows, organized by color and season. My silk blouses, my work suits, the beautiful cocktail dress I wore for date nights that had, apparently, been a complete and utter lie. With an eerie, detached calm, I began pulling them from the hangers. One by one, I folded them neatly, my hands moving with unnerving precision, smoothing out the wrinkles, and placed them inside the suitcase. His suitcase. The dress I wore to my father's funeral, the sweater he bought me for Christmas 5 years ago. Each item was a memory, a piece of our shared history, and I was putting it all away. The silence in the room grew thick and suffocating. The only sound was the soft whisper of cloth, the quiet click of the hangers. Their amusement was rapidly fading, replaced by a nascent, horrified comprehension. Kinsley was the first to finally process what she was seeing. Her voice was a sharp, incredulous hiss. "Wait, you're putting your clothes in his suitcase?" I continued packing. My favorite cashmere sweater, my comfortable jeans, my gym clothes, it all went in. I was a methodical, silent machine. The cold, hard diamond of resolution inside me was in charge. It was directing my hands now, my feet, my every move. They wanted to see what I would do. I was going to show them, and I wasn't going to say a single word while I did it. Their panic was now palpable, a frantic energy radiating from the doorway. "Simone, stop it. This is childish. It's not funny," Darnell said, his voice taking on a sharper, more authoritative edge. The laughter was a distant memory, replaced by the nervous bluster of a man realizing too late that he had fundamentally miscalculated. He had assumed tears, arguments, maybe a plate thrown against the wall. He hadn't anticipated this cold, silent, methodical dismantling of his life. I ignored him. After packing my essential clothes, I walked into the spacious primary bathroom. I grabbed my toiletries from the marble vanity, my expensive face cream that he always griped about the price of, my Chanel perfume he bought me for my 50th birthday, my electric toothbrush. Everything went into a travel bag and then into the suitcase. They simply stood there staring, two useless statues of flesh and blood. My silence was a wall of reinforced concrete they couldn't penetrate. I zipped the large suitcase closed with a final, satisfying tug and set it on the floor. Then I went back to the closet and pulled down the matching leather carry-on bag, the beautiful satchel we had used for weekend getaways to Napa. "Hello? Earth to Simone? Are you seriously giving me the silent treatment?" Darnell's voice was getting louder, almost a shout. "Okay, I messed up. It's bad. I get it. But you can't do this. You can't throw away a family. Our family." "You lit our family on fire, and you used the flames to keep warm," I thought, as I started packing my shoes. I packed my laptop, my work files, the antique silver photo frame from my desk that held a picture of my parents. As I packed, I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed where I had slept trustingly beside a liar for who knows how long, and pulled out my phone. My fingers were surprisingly steady. Darnell and Kinsley exchanged a nervous glance. "What are you doing on your phone now?" Kinsley asked, her voice turning shrill. I opened my banking app. It was a blessing, truly. A stroke of karmic justice that I had always been the one to handle our finances. I was the architect, the planner, the one who managed the investments and paid the bills. The house was in my name. I had made the down payment with a small inheritance from my grandmother. Most of our assets, the cars, the brokerage account, the emergency fund, were all tied to my accounts, my salary. I scrolled to the authorized user list on my American Express Platinum card. There was his name, Darnell Jenkins. I remember how excited he was when I added it, how he had shown off the heavy metallic card to his friends at the golf club. With a single tap, a confirmation screen popped up. "Are you sure you wish to remove this user?" I pressed confirm without a second's hesitation. A small digital guillotine. Next, the car insurance. The policy for the Lexus RX he drove so proudly, the one he considered his car, was in my name as part of my multi-vehicle discount plan. I found the number in my contacts and called, putting the phone on speaker. The cheerful, repetitive hold music, a generic, smooth jazz melody, filled the tense silence of the room. Darnell was staring at the phone in my lap, his face pale and slack-jawed. "Thank you for calling Safeguard. This is Linda. How can I help you?" "Hi, Linda," I said. My voice was even and calm, the voice of a stranger. "I'd like to make a change to my policy." I gave her the details, the Lexus and the primary driver to be removed. Darnell Jenkins. "Simone, you can't do that," he sputtered, finally surging forward. "I need that car for work, for my clients." "Ma'am, the change will be effective immediately," the agent chirped on the other end, oblivious to the situation. "The vehicle and driver have been removed. Is there anything else I can assist you with today?" "No, thank you, Linda. You've been a great help," I said, and hung up. I looked at him. His face was a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. You canceled my insurance?" I didn't answer. I simply returned to my phone, opened the app for our mobile carrier, and with a few more taps, began the process of removing his line from my family plan. His phone would be disconnected in the next billing cycle. One by one, I was cutting the strings that tied him to my life, and more importantly, to my finances. I changed the password to our Amazon Prime account. I changed the Netflix password. I went into the smart home app and revoked his access to the security system. Small digital acts of eviction, and with every tap, I felt a part of my power return. The look on their faces was a grotesque mixture of panic and sputtering indignation. Kinsley, who had been watching in silent, smug superiority, now looked genuinely frightened. The foundation of the comfortable, subsidized life she was trying to insert herself into was being demolished before her eyes. "This is insane," Darnell stammered, running a hand through his thinning hair. "You're throwing away 25 years of marriage over some stupid texts." "Stupid texts?" My voice was dangerously low, a growl coming from the depths of my shattered soul. It was the first time I had addressed him directly in what felt like an eternity. The cold diamond of resolution inside me was heating up, turning into a white, concentrated rage. "Give me your phone." "What?" "No," he said, clutching it protectively to his chest, like a child with a toy. "Darnell," I said, my voice leaving no room for discussion or negotiation, "you can give it to me now, or I will consider that a full and complete confession, and my lawyer will subpoena it in the divorce proceedings. And trust me, it will look much, much worse for you then. You choose." I knew using those words would get his attention. It did. He hesitated, his jaw clenched with fury, and then practically threw the phone at me. It landed softly on the duvet. I picked it up. I unlocked it. The code was 1125, the birthday of our first dog, a goofy golden retriever named Star, who had died 10 years ago. He hadn't even bothered to change it. The intimacy of that knowledge, the shared secret of that number, felt like a violation now. I opened his messages with Kinsley. They weren't just a few texts. They were a novel, an epic of deception. It went back months. I scrolled and scrolled, my heart turning into a block of ice in my chest. The sheer volume of their communication was staggering. Good morning texts, good night texts, flirtatious jokes throughout the workday. Then there were the pictures. Photos of my sister in lingerie I'd never seen, posing suggestively in what looked like a hotel room. Photos that turned my stomach. There were inside jokes, cruel nicknames for me, vile comments about my job, my friends, my body. They had built a whole secret world, and the foundation of that world was their shared contempt for me. Then I found it, the thread from last month. Darnell had told me he was going on a business trip, a sales conference in Laguna Beach. I had helped him pack his suitcase. I had dropped him off at the airport at 5 in the morning. I had texted him every night telling him I missed him. It was all a lie. The messages exposed it in nauseating, pornographic detail. It was a romantic getaway with Kinsley. She had flown out to meet him. They had stayed at the Pacific Crest Resort, a luxurious 5-star resort on the beach. And the worst part, the final, soul-crushing blow. I found the email confirmation he had forwarded to her, the one with the final bill. It had been paid for with my American Express card, the one I had just canceled. The trip had cost over $7,000. My hands were shaking now, not from weakness, but from pure, unadulterated fury. I looked up from the screen, my eyes locking onto theirs. Both of them looked away, unable to hold my gaze. I decided to read one of the messages out loud, my voice dripping venom. "Kinsley, is Simone suspicious? Worried she'll look at the card statement." I paused, letting the words hang in the air like toxic smoke. "Darnell, no clue. She's too busy managing her little empire to notice me. Besides, she thinks my promotion is coming through, so she won't question any charges right now. She's predictable." My little empire, the business I had built from the ground up with sleepless nights and weekends sacrificed on the altar of its success. The business that paid for this house, for his Lexus, for his golf club membership, for their secret, sordid vacation. The rage was so intense, I felt like I could combust. "You took my money," I said. My voice trembled with the effort of keeping it level. To take my sister on vacation while lying to my face about a promotion that wasn't even real. Darnell had the nerve to look ashamed for a fleeting second. Kinsley, however, simply crossed her arms, chin defiant. "He deserved a little fun," her voice dripped with venom. "You've been so wrapped up in your work for years you barely pay attention to him. What did you expect?" That was it. The final, unforgivable betrayal. Not just the affair, not just the theft, but the justification, the blame. In their twisted, selfish minds, this was somehow my fault. The last vestiges of love, of history, of family connection I had for either of them evaporated in that moment, replaced by nothing but a vast, empty expanse of contempt. A strange, chilling clarity came over me. The path forward, which had been a chaotic mess of pain and confusion moments before, was now illuminated by the hard, bright fire of my anger. There was nothing left to salvage here, and nothing left to say to these two monstrously self-centered people. I closed his phone and tossed it onto the bed. Then I pulled out my own phone again. For the last time in this house. My fingers flew across the screen, my movements efficient and precise. "What now?" Darnell asked, his voice weary, as if he were talking to a wild animal he wasn't sure would attack. "Who are you calling now?" I didn't answer him. I called my best friend Ava. We'd been friends since college. We'd leaned on each other through everything. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Simone, what's up?" Her cheerful, familiar voice came through the speaker, a lifeline to the sane world. "Ava," I said. and my voice finally cracked. Just for a second, a single fissure in the icy facade. "Can I come stay with you for a few days? I need to get out of here." The cheerfulness vanished from her voice, replaced by immediate, urgent concern. "Oh my God, of course! What happened? Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm at the house," I said, looking directly at Darnell as the words left my mouth. "Darnell has been cheating on me with Kinsley." There was a stunned, horrified silence on the other end, then a string of curses that almost made me smile. "That absolute bastard! That snake! Of course you can stay. Don't even ask. I'm coming to get you right now." "No," I said quickly. "Don't come here. I don't want you in this house with them. I'm leaving now. I'll get an Uber." Okay, honey. The guest room is always ready for you. You know that. The door will be open. Get there safe. And Simone, call me as soon as you're in that car." "I will. Thank you," I whispered and hung up. Next, I opened the Uber app. I put in Ava's address. The map showed a car icon just a few blocks away. 5 minutes. The reality of the situation, its finality, finally seemed to crash down on them. This wasn't a temporary dramatic gesture. This wasn't a fit of pique. I was actually, truly leaving. "Wait! You can't just leave!" Kinsley shrieked, her defiance crumbling into a pathetic, childish whine. "This is your house!" "Exactly," I said, my voice cold again. "It's my house, which is why I get to leave it. You two can stay here for now." Darnell moved to block the door, planting his feet like a sentry. "Simone, please, let's sit down and talk about this like adults. We can fix this. I know we can. We can go to therapy." "Therapy?" I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound that was more like a bark. "You think a 60-minute session with a counselor can fix this? You think we can talk our way out of this? There is nothing to fix. A marriage, a relationship, those are structures that can be repaired. But this is a toxic waste dump, and I'm evacuating." My phone vibrated. My Uber was outside. I grabbed the handles of the 2 heavy leather suitcases. They were filled with the curated pieces of the life I thought I had. A life that was now nothing more than dead weight. I started wheeling them toward the bedroom door. They both lunged, trying to stop me. Kinsley grabbed one of the suitcases, fumbling with the zipper. "You're not going anywhere. We have to talk." Darnell put his hands on my shoulders, his grip surprisingly strong. "Simone, please don't do this. Think about what you're throwing away." I stopped. I looked at his hands on my shoulders, the hands of a stranger. Then I looked up at his face, a face I no longer recognized. Then I looked at my sister, who was desperately trying to unpack my shoes, as if that would somehow keep me there. I felt a wave of disgust so profound it nearly made me gag. I shrugged his hands off me with a force that surprised even myself. I looked at both of them, these 2 people who had been the twin pillars of my universe, now just pathetic, selfish strangers standing among the wreckage they created. "You asked me what I was going to do," I said. My voice was firm, clear, and final. "I'm going to live without either of you." And with that, I wheeled my bags past them. I walked down the grand staircase and out the heavy oak front door of my house for the very last time. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. The cool night air hit my face like a slap, bringing me back into my own body. The Uber, a clean black sedan, waited at the curb, its engine silently humming. The driver, a kind-faced man with a 100% satisfaction rating and a gentle smile, got out immediately when he saw me struggling with the heavy bags. "Let me get that for you, ma'am, I got it," he said in a soft voice. He expertly lifted the suitcases and placed them in the trunk. He must have seen the look on my face, the tear tracks on my cheeks, the shaking in my hands, because he asked no questions, simply opened the back door for me and gave me a simple, understanding nod. The minute I slid into the back seat and the door clicked shut, the adrenaline that had been surging through my veins for the last hour vanished, as if a switch had been flipped. It left behind a hollow, cavernous emptiness that was almost worse than the rage. The car pulled away from the curb, and I watched my beautiful home, the one with the perfectly manicured lawn and the cozy gas lanterns I'd installed last year, recede into the darkness. My house, my sanctuary, and they were still inside it. The thought was a physical violation. Then my phone, which I still gripped with white knuckles, began to explode. First, it was Darnell. The screen lit up with his name and picture, a photo of us in Napa, smiling from a lifetime ago. I stared at it, then pressed the red button to reject the call with a vicious swipe of my thumb. A second later, a text message popped up. "Simone, pick up the phone. This is crazy. You're acting like a child." I ignored it. Then Kinsley. Her name appeared, and a new wave of nausea and betrayal washed over me. I rejected her call. A flurry of text messages followed from her, too. One after another, a rapid-fire assault. "You can't do this to us. You're abandoning your family. You're destroying everything with your selfishness." I was destroying everything? The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it all was almost impressive. The phone kept buzzing, vibrating against my leg. A relentless electronic tether to the two people I now despised more than anyone on earth. It felt like they were trying to pull me back, to drag me back into the toxicity and lies through that one little glowing device. Darnell called again. This time, a voicemail notification popped up. Then Kinsley, then Darnell again. I watched the screen light up with their names, flashing in the dark car like warning signs. With 2 decisive taps, I found their contacts and blocked them. The buzzing stopped. The silence in the car was suddenly deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the tires on the asphalt. And in that stillness, as the familiar streetlights of my neighborhood blurred past the window, it finally hit me. The tectonic, crushing weight of it all. 25 years of marriage, 30 years of sisterhood, gone. Vaporized in a single night of cruel laughter and overwhelming betrayal. I stared out the window at the blurred lights of other people's houses, other people's normal lives, and realized silent tears were streaming down my face again, the salt of them stinging the raw skin of my cheeks. I wasn't sobbing. It was a silent, desperate kind of weeping for a life that was now over, for a future that had been stolen from me. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his expression filled with concern. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked quietly. I couldn't find my voice to answer, so I just nodded, a small, pathetic shake of my head. Then I whispered, mostly to myself, a promise to the broken woman reflected in the window. "I will be." And in the quiet of that car, with my whole world stuffed into a suitcase that wasn't even mine, I felt completely and utterly alone. But telling this story, sharing this with you, makes me feel a little less alone. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below. That way, I'll know you're my amazing supporters, and I'll understand that you're with me on this journey. Your support is an incredible encouragement to me. Please comment the number 1 so I can recognize you. And now, please listen as I continue my story. The first night at Ava's house was a blur of shock and exhaustion. She met me at the door, wrapped me in a massive hug, and didn't let go for a full minute. She didn't press me for details, didn't ask a million questions. She just guided me to her guest room, a cozy, safe space, and brought me a mug of tea and a glass of whiskey and an Advil PM. I think I slept, but it was a fitful, nightmare-ridden sleep, haunted by the sound of their laughter. I woke up on Saturday morning feeling like I'd been in a car crash. Every part of me ached, but the cold core of resolution inside me was still there. It had hardened overnight into something unbreakable. Ava was my rock. She sat with me at her kitchen table while I stared into a cup of coffee, and when I was ready, she didn't offer platitudes. She offered a plan. "Okay," she said, her voice firm. "What's step 1? "A lawyer," I said, my own voice surprising me with its steadiness. "Not just any lawyer, the best, most ruthless divorce attorney in the city." Ava nodded, already typing on her laptop. "I know one. They call him the Shark. He handled my cousin's nasty divorce." By 9 a.m. Monday, I was sitting in the sterile, overly air-conditioned office of Mr. Sterling A. Vance, a man with a shock of white hair, piercing blue eyes, and a reputation for being a shark in a $3,000 suit. I needed a shark. The office was on the 40th floor with a sweeping view of the city I had helped build. I felt a small, grim irony. I told him everything, laying it all out on the polished mahogany of his desk. The 25-year marriage, the fact that I was the primary earner with documentation to prove it, the house in my name bought with my inheritance. I explained the financial entanglement, the cars, the accounts. Then I told him about Darnell and Kinsley and the events of Thursday night. I had saved the text messages from their friends and the unblocked numbers. I played him the voicemail messages they had started leaving, a pathetic, chaotic mix of feigned remorse, furious accusations, and desperate pleas. Mr. Vance listened patiently, his face impassive, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. He didn't interrupt. When I finally finished, my throat raw, he removed his gold-rimmed glasses and slowly polished them with a silk cloth. "Well, Simone," he said. His voice was quiet and deeply reassuring. "This is a mess, a heartbreaking, despicable mess, but from a legal standpoint, it is remarkably clean." He confirmed what I already suspected. Since I was the sole owner on the house deed, Darnell and Kinsley were, in legal terms, squatters. They were my guests, and their invitation had been soundly revoked. "We will file for divorce proceedings immediately. We'll cite adultery with special prejudice," he explained, his voice crisp and professional. "We will also file an emergency order to freeze all joint assets, though it appears there are very few. And most importantly, we will serve them with a formal, legally binding eviction notice. They will have 30 days to vacate your property. If they refuse, we will have them removed by the marshal's office." The words felt both terrifying and empowering. Eviction, marshal's office. This was real. This was the machinery of my freedom. He drew up the documents right there, his paralegal springing into action. The formal notice was sent out with a process server that very afternoon. I paid the extra fee to have it delivered immediately. I imagined the scene, a severe-looking stranger showing up at the door of my beautiful home and handing them the crisp, cold legal documents demanding they leave. Their reaction was immediate and nuclear. My phone, which had been blissfully silent since I blocked them, started buzzing with notifications from unknown numbers and newly created email addresses. They had resorted to new tactics to circumvent my blocks. The emails were a torrent of rage and delusion. Darnell, using a new Gmail account, wrote, "An eviction notice? After everything I've given to this family? After all the support I've given your career? You are going to hear from my lawyer. You can't just kick me out onto the street." Kinsley, from an equally new account, wrote, "You are a cold, heartless monster. I am your sister. I have rights as a resident. I am not leaving. This is my home too." I immediately forwarded every single message to Mr. Vance with the simple note, "For your file." He replied almost instantly, "Excellent. Each message is another nail in their coffin. Keep documenting everything." The battle lines had been drawn. They thought they could intimidate me, that they could harass me into compliance with empty threats. They had forgotten who they were dealing with. They had forgotten that I was the one who had built the empire they were so comfortably installed in, and I was about to remind them with the full force of the law on my side. I knew it would come. I had dreaded it more than the confrontation with Darnell and Kinsley, more than the meeting with the lawyer, the phone call. It came on a Saturday morning, a week after I left. I was at Ava's kitchen table sketching designs for a new project in a notebook, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in the meticulous, ordered world of lines and angles. The phone rang, and the caller ID showed a number I knew as well as my own. Mom. My hand hovered over the phone. A part of me, the wounded child part, wanted to simply let it ring, to retreat into the safe cocoon of silence I was building around my broken heart. But the architect in me, the part that faces problems head-on, knew I couldn't. I had to confront this. I took a deep, bracing breath and answered. "Hello, Mom." "Simone, thank goodness." Her voice was frantic, breathless, with a manufactured drama I knew too well. "I've been calling and calling. Kinsley finally told me what happened. She said you had some kind of breakdown, a horrible misunderstanding, and you kicked them out of the house." A breakdown. A misunderstanding. That was the story they were spinning. Of course, it painted me as the unstable one, them as the victims. It was masterful in its cruelty. "That's not what happened, Mom," I said. My voice was tired, devoid of the energy needed for this fight. "Simone, how could you do this?" she continued without listening, a tidal wave of guilt. "That's your husband of 25 years. And Kinsley, for God's sake, Simone. She's your sister, your little sister. She called me sobbing. She says she has nowhere to go. You can't just throw your own sister onto the street." The unfairness of it all was like a physical blow. The fact that her first concern was for the perpetrator, not the victim. "Mom," I said. My voice grew colder. "Did they tell you why I left? Did they tell you I found them together? That they've been having an affair for months behind my back? In my house, spending my money?" There was a pause, a brief, telling silence. I could hear her take a shaky breath. "Well," she finally said, her voice softer but still laced with reproach. Kinsley said it was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. She feels awful. People make mistakes, Simone. Good people. Family is supposed to forgive. You can't throw away a 25-year marriage and your relationship with your sister over one mistake. One mistake, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Mom, it wasn't one mistake. It was hundreds of mistakes, hundreds of lies, every single day. And when I confronted them, they laughed in my face. They stood in my kitchen, and they laughed. Kinsley is very fragile right now, my mother continued, her voice taking on a whiny, pleading tone I despised. She's always looked up to you. And Darnell is your husband. For better or worse, remember your vows. You owe it to your family, to your father's memory, to try to fix this. That was the word that triggered it. Vows. I owe them nothing, I said, my voice now like ice. The last shred of hope I had for her support, her maternal protection, died in my heart. I've given them everything for years. I paid Kinsley's master's degree application fees. I gave Darnell an interest-free loan to start his failed consultancy. I paid for their secret vacation. What I owe is to myself. I owe it to myself not to be a doormat, not to be a fool, and not to allow my home to be a brothel for my husband and my sister. They have 30 days to find a new place to live. That is more generosity than they deserve. I could hear her start to cry on the other end, the wet, choppy sobs of someone who isn't getting her way. You're destroying this family, Simone. You're being so selfish. No, Mom, I said, I'm not. They already did. I'm just cleaning up the mess. I ended the call. I sat there in the silence of Ava's sunny kitchen, the notepad with my beautiful, ordered designs mocking me from the table. I realized, with a deep and painful clarity, that I had not only lost a husband and a sister, I had, in a way, lost my mother too. Her loyalty I saw now wasn't to her children, but to the fragile, idealized image of a perfect family she wanted to project to the world, and I had just shattered that image. I was truly, completely alone. The next 2 weeks were a strange, surreal limbo. I lived at Ava's, working remotely and trying to create a new routine. Ava was a saint, giving me space when I needed it, and forcing me to eat when I forgot. The days were a haze of legal emails, work calls, and long, aimless walks. The nights were the hardest, filled with a suffocating loneliness. Meanwhile, Darnell and Kinsley's campaign of desperation intensified. Having failed to break me with my mother's emotional blackmail, they resorted to a campaign of petty, irritating harassment. It began with the finances. I received another fraud alert, this time from my brokerage account. Someone had attempted to log in and initiate a wire transfer. The security protocols I had established with my financial advisor held firm, and the attempt was blocked. I knew it was Darnell. He was testing the defenses, looking for a weak spot. Then came the social media smear campaign. Kinsley, who had always been obsessed with her online image, posted a long, rambling, tearful story on Facebook. She was clever. She didn't mention the affair, of course. She painted a picture of a concerned, heartbroken sister, worried about her older sister's sudden and alarming mental instability. She claimed I had become paranoid and delusional, that I was under extreme work stress, and had kicked them out of the house based on a terrible misunderstanding. She ended the post with a plea for her friends to pray for me and my healing. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive victimhood. My phone started buzzing with messages from distant relatives and old family friends, all expressing concern. Is everything okay, Simone? I heard you're going through a tough time. Kinsley's so worried about you. Normally, I don't engage in social media drama. It's undignified. But this was a calculated attack on my sanity and my reputation. It required a response. I didn't write a long post. I didn't engage in a war of words. I simply went to her post and left a single public comment. Ask her about the business conference at the Pacific Crest Resort last month, then ask her who paid for it. I have the credit card receipts charged to my account. Seems misunderstandings are getting quite expensive these days. The comment section exploded. People started asking questions. Within an hour, Kinsley's entire post and all the comments had been deleted. But they weren't done. The pettiness escalated to the bizarre. My weekly grocery delivery from the local store was mysteriously canceled. My subscription to the Wall Street Journal was suspended for non-payment, even though it was on auto draft. A dozen pizzas showed up on Ava's doorstep one night, ordered under my name. Small, incredibly childish things designed to disrupt my life and get a rise out of me. Each time, I calmly addressed the issue. I called the credit card company and disputed the pizza charge. I reinstated subscriptions with new payment information. And I documented everything. Every canceled subscription, every fraudulent pizza order, every manipulative social media post. I created an email folder and sent a summary to Mr. Vance every night. His responses were always brief and encouraging. "This is excellent. They are building our case for us. They thought they were harassing me into submission." What they were actually doing was methodically documenting their own instability and malice. They were so blinded by their own entitlement and rage that they couldn't see they were no longer fighting me. They were fighting themselves, and they were losing miserably. Every petty act was another shovelful of dirt on their own graves. The harassment was a constant low-level hum of stress in the background of my life. I was becoming numb to it, learning to treat it as a logistical problem to solve rather than an emotional assault. I was focusing on my own path forward. I spent my days at Ava's working remotely, and I began the painful but necessary process of untangling my life. I was also looking at new condos online, scrolling through listings for smaller, brighter places, just for me. The idea of starting over at 52 was terrifying, but with each passing day, it also felt increasingly like a necessary and exhilarating liberation. Then they crossed a line, a bright, irrevocable red line that there was no coming back from. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was on a work conference call when an email popped up on my screen. It was from my primary bank, the one that held my mortgage and my main checking account. The subject line was innocuous: "Update on your recent application." I frowned. I hadn't applied for anything. I opened the email. It was a standard auto message. "Congratulations on your new auto loan," it cheerfully stated. I stared at the screen, the blood turning to ice water in my veins. The voices on my conference call faded into a distant, meaningless drone. I had not applied for a car loan. With shaking hands, I clicked the link in the email. It took me to a loan document. There it was in black and white. An application for a loan for $6,500 for a new Lexus RX SUV. The same model Darnell had been complaining about wanting for months. It had been filed online using my full name, my address, my date of birth, and my social security number. And because of my excellent credit history, it had been instantly approved. I felt like I was going to vomit. This was no longer just pettiness, no longer childish harassment. This was a crime. This was calculated criminal identity theft. They were trying to saddle me with crippling debt, to ruin the financial stability I had worked my entire life to build. I excused myself from the conference call, my voice a tight whisper. I immediately called the bank's fraud department. The woman on the other end, a calm professional named Linda, listened patiently as I frantically explained the situation, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. "Yes, ma'am. I see the application here," she said after a few moments of typing. "It was submitted this morning from an IP address linked to your home Wi-Fi network." Of course it was. They had used my own internet service, the one I paid for, to commit a felony against me. The audacity was simply unbelievable. Linda immediately froze the loan and opened a high-priority investigation. But I knew I couldn't stop there. This was no longer just a messy, painful divorce. It had escalated to something far more dangerous. With a heavy heart and a sense of grim finality, I did something I never in my worst nightmares thought I would do. I picked up the phone and called the police department. I asked to file a formal complaint for identity theft and attempted aggravated fraud against my husband, Darnell Jenkins, and my sister, Kinsley Martin. I had to go down to the local precinct. I sat on a sterile, uncomfortable plastic chair under flickering fluorescent lights and recounted the entire sordid story to a weary-looking Detective Shaw. I had to give him my social security number, my date of birth, all the intimate details of my life they had stolen and twisted for their own gain. I showed him the emails, the eviction notice, the loan application. Detective Shaw was surprisingly kind, his eyes filled with a tired compassion. "Ma'am," he said when I finished, leaning back in his squeaky chair, "you did the right thing. We see this kind of thing. Coercive control, financial abuse, more than you imagine in contentious separations. You've given us a very clear motive and a digital trail to follow. We'll open an investigation immediately." When I walked out of the precinct into the setting sun, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt empty and incredibly sad. They had been so consumed by their greed and their pathological desire to hurt me that they had been willing to risk their own freedom. They had forced my hand, and now the consequences would be out of my control. The family drama had become a police matter, and I knew with chilling certainty that this was the beginning of the end. The final few days leading up to the eviction deadline were filled with a tense, ominous silence. The harassing emails stopped. The unknown numbers stopped calling. It was the calm before the storm, a dead, heavy stillness that was more unnerving than their noise. I spent the time in a whirlwind of activity, finalizing the lease on a new apartment and arranging the move, trying to focus on the future instead of the impending confrontation. The 30th day arrived. It was a gray, overcast Friday morning. The sky threatened rain. Mr. Vance had arranged to meet me at the house at 10 a.m. to formally take possession. He had been adamant. "Do not go alone, Simone. I will be there, and I have already coordinated with the police. 2 officers will meet us there as backup." As I pulled onto my own street, a street I had lived on for 15 years, my heart pounded a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. I saw Mr. Vance's black Mercedes parked behind 2 official police department vehicles. He was waiting on the curb, his face grim, a leather briefcase in his hand. "They are still inside," he said quietly as I approached. They refused to open the door for the officers. My stomach turned with a mixture of fear and anger. I had foolishly hoped they would have simply left, packed up, and slunk away into the night, leaving me to pick up the pieces in peace. Of course, they weren't going to make it that easy. The 2 police officers were professional and stern. They were large men, and their presence was both intimidating and deeply reassuring. The senior officer knocked on the heavy oak door one last time, his knuckles making a loud, authoritative sound. "Police! Open the door!" Silence. "All right," he said. Turning to his partner, he used a lock-picking tool, and the door clicked softly open. "Ma'am, Mr. Vance, please stay behind us." They stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the stench, a foul combination of stale cigarette smoke, rotting garbage, and cheap air freshener. The house, my beautiful, pristine house, was ruined. The flawless oak floors were scratched and stained. There was trash everywhere, greasy pizza boxes, empty wine bottles, overflowing garbage bags piled in the corners. My beautiful silk drapes had been torn down from the rods. The plush gray sectional sofa had a long, deliberate slice in the cushions, its white stuffing spilling out like entrails. The framed photos on the mantelpiece had been smashed, the glass crunching under our feet as we walked. My life in silver frames, shattered, and on the living room wall, right above the fireplace, written in what looked like bright red lipstick, were the words, "Witch, Gold Digger." I felt a wave of dizziness and leaned against the doorframe for support. This wasn't just mess, this was malice. It was a deliberate, hateful act of desecration. We found them in the primary bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bare mattress, which was also stained. They were surrounded by a few hastily packed bags. They looked pathetic, defeated. Their sharp clothing was wrinkled, their faces pale and drawn. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sullen, childish resentment. "You are required to vacate the premises immediately," the lead officer said, his voice booming in the ruined room. Darnell just stared at the floor, refusing to look at me. But Kinsley, my sister, looked up, her eyes filled with pure, venomous hatred. "I hope you're happy, Simone," she spat, her voice cracking. "You destroyed everything." "I didn't destroy anything, Kinsley," I said. My voice was shaky, but clear. "I just turned on the lights." Just as the officers prepared to escort them out, there was a knock on the open front door. 2 new figures appeared in the hallway. They were in plain clothes, a man and a woman, and they flashed badges and leather wallets. "Judicial Police," the man said, his eyes scanning the room. "We're here to speak with Darnell Jenkins and Kinsley Martin." A new kind of fear, cold, sharp, and completely different from the fear of eviction, crossed Darnell and Kinsley's faces. This was no longer about the house. The lead detective, whom I recognized as Detective Shaw from the precinct, addressed them. "We have a warrant to search the premises and to seize any electronic devices. This is related to an ongoing investigation into a felony of identity theft and bank fraud." Kinsley burst into tears, a high, wailing, theatrical sound. Darnell simply collapsed, as if all the bones had been taken out of his body. He looked 20 years older. The detectives read them their rights, the familiar words from TV crime shows now a chilling reality in my own bedroom. They placed my husband and my sister in handcuffs as they led them out of the house, past the remains of the life we once shared. Darnell finally looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, just a hollow, empty despair. He knew it was all over. I stood there in the middle of my ruined home and watched them being ushered into the back of separate, unmarked police cars. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I only felt an overwhelming, profound sense of silent, blessed relief. The storm had finally passed. The house was a wreck, but it was my wreck, and it was finally quiet. The months that followed were a painful, methodical process of cleanup. There was the physical cleanup, which required a professional team specializing in biohazards and property damage. It took weeks. There was the legal cleanup, which involved endless meetings with Mr. Vance, insurance adjusters, and the district attorney's office. And then there was the emotional cleanup, the hardest part of all, which is still ongoing. The legal case against them was a slam dunk. The detectives found the loan applications and a wealth of other incriminating evidence on Darnell's laptop, which had been seized from my bedroom. Faced with irrefutable digital proof, both he and Kinsley accepted a plea deal to avoid a longer, more public trial. They avoided jail time, a fact that initially infuriated me. But Mr. Vance helped me see it another way. A trial would have been a circus, Simone, he had said. This is cleaner, and the consequences are still severe. He was right. They were sentenced to 5 years of supervised probation. They were ordered to pay restitution for the damages to the house, and they had to complete 500 hours of community service. Both of them now had criminal records. Their professional and personal lives were in ruins. Darnell was fired from his job. Kinsley's nursing license was put under review. They became pariahs. The divorce was finalized quickly and quietly. Thanks to their criminal actions and the mountain of evidence of adultery and financial abuse, Darnell got nothing. The house, the savings, the investments, my retirement plan, it was all protected as my separate property and personal earnings. He left with his clothes, his debt, and his criminal record. The last I heard from a mutual acquaintance was that he was living in a cheap rented apartment across town, working a low-level sales job selling office supplies. Kinsley's fate was in some ways even sadder. My mother, finally forced to face the ugly, undeniable truth, was devastated. She tried to support Kinsley, but their already strained relationship fractured under the weight of shame and disappointment. Kinsley lost most of her friends, who were horrified by what she had done. She moved to another state to live with an aunt, trying to escape her ruined reputation. We haven't spoken a single word since the day she was arrested. Sometimes I wonder if I ever will hear from her again. As for me, I couldn't stand to stay in that house. I couldn't sleep in that bedroom or cook in that kitchen. It was tainted with too many bad memories, stained by their betrayal. I had the professional crew restore it to its former beauty, every wall repainted, every floor refinished, and then I put it on the market. It sold in 1 week. With the proceeds, I bought a small, sunny, 2-bedroom condo in a modern high-rise in the city. It has a balcony overlooking the park, and it's all mine. The day I moved in, carrying a single box of my most precious belongings, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I spent weeks decorating it, not with things to impress others, but with things that made me happy. I bought a ridiculously comfortable velvet armchair. I started an indoor herb garden. I signed up for a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to do. My first creations were lopsided and ugly, but the feeling of the cool, white clay spinning in my hands, of creating something new from a lump of earth, felt like a powerful metaphor for my own life. One day, I was clearing out the last of the moving boxes, and I found them, tucked away in the back of the storage closet. The expensive Italian leather suitcases I had bought Darnell all those years ago, the ones I had used to pack my things on that terrible night. I stood there for a long time, just looking at them, these symbols of a life and a love that had been a lie. I didn't hesitate. I dragged them down to the building's large dumpster and threw them in, one after another. They made a satisfying thump as they hit the bottom. The next day, I went out and bought a completely new set of luggage. It was light, durable, and a beautiful, vibrant shade of sapphire blue. It was mine. My life is smaller now and much quieter, but it is real, it is honest, and it is entirely my own. Last week, I booked a trip, a solo trip, 2 weeks in Charleston, South Carolina, something I've always dreamed of. I'm going to eat local food, drink wine, sit on the beach, and read books. Sometimes, late at night when the city is quiet, I still hear their laughter. I still remember Darnell's smug, mocking question. "What are you going to do? Divorce me?" He thought it was a threat. He thought it was the worst thing that could happen to me. He had no idea it would be the beginning of my salvation. He had no idea I would do exactly that, and so much more. I would not only divorce him, I would dismantle the life he took for granted. I would hold him and my sister accountable for their crimes, and I would build a new life from the ashes. A life of my own making, one carefully chosen piece at a time. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.